This is My College Corner's Ask the Expert series. I'm your host, John Hupalo. Today, we focus on saving for college. Actually, it's really a little broader than that. It's more like saving for education. Joining me is savings expert Patricia Roberts. Patricia, welcome.
Thank you, John. I'm so happy to be here today with you.
Well, I'm glad you're here. Our audience doesn't know, but you've had deep, long, beautiful background in the 529 world. You're a lawyer. You've worked at some of the big firms like Citi, Merrill, AllianceBernstein Investments. You are currently the chief operating officer of Gift of College, and I'll tell our watchers a little bit later. I just love Gift of College. What you and Wayne are doing to innovate in the 529 space is just absolutely spectacular. I want to talk about that down the road, but I want to start because you are an author of this book. Oh,
So
you
there,
got it there.
I
Yeah,
got on my
thanks.
desk.
Author of Root, or is it Route? Which way do you like to say it?
You know, I say route. People say route. Doesn't really matter.
Yeah, author of Root or Route 529, but it is a parent's guide to saving for college and career training with 529 plans. It is the book if you are interested in saving for college. And Patricia, I'm just so happy that you're here with us. And one of the things that I think is so spectacular about your career and what you've done is that we see the end result of that. That's kind of the byproduct of what drove your passion to dedicate yourself to your work in this field. And what comes through, like right before you get to the numbered pages in the book, you talk about the effect that your mom had on you, your family. Your son wrote the foreword. I don't think I've ever read a book before where an author's son wrote a foreword. There are pictures of them right in the book. It's really what this is all about. And that had to have a big effect on you. Just tell us about what drives your passion and how important they are to what you've done in your life.
Absolutely. And thank you for reading the book and looking at it so carefully. That warms my heart. I love to hear from readers. So, by way of background, which you'll know from the book, but your listeners may not, I'm a product of a very low income and at times no income family led by a single mom due to circumstances that changed when I was a child. And I became a first generation college goer, but almost missed the opportunity to attend college because of the fragile state of my family and because of cost. And in fact, I had a high school guidance counselor strongly suggest that I stick with that waitressing job that I had for the weekends and weeknights and just continue along that path. And my mom would have none of it. So I did go to college in the end, and I was able to work multiple jobs and send money home to help my mom and my one brother who has a developmental disability. I'm hugely passionate about higher education and the many doors it can open because I experienced that. And it is higher education, I am certain, that enabled me to lift myself and my family out of those challenging circumstances. I eventually, John, you don't know this, bought a home for my mom and brother to live in. And that really would never have been possible had I stuck with that waitressing career. So I got the higher education. It did come at a cost, even while working multiple jobs and going to law school at night. I borrowed tens of thousands of dollars, but I still say there was a value in that. I see it every day, and I'm very glad I did. But I'm on a mission to help others avoid debt and regret when it comes to preparing for higher education. And I certainly did that for my son, who is a recent debt-free grad. With a lot of effort on my part and his dad's part, we were determined that he not wind up with the financial stress we did when we graduated from college, and we achieved it little steps at a time. So
Well,
yes, a very close personal connection to all of this.
yes, and many of us do. It is we are driven by the heart and wanting to try to help people along the way. And you gave a spectacular piece of advice, or actually three pieces of advice to my question for advice that you would give to anyone who wants to save. Do you remember what you said?
Do I remember what I said? Yes, you said, what's one piece of advice? I gave you multiple, but one piece of advice was just get started and get started now. And people delay way too long. They regret it. as they look back on their life, get started now. And then I added in, and don't go it alone. Be sure to let others know that you're on a journey to save for a child's future or a loved one's future, and invite them to join you on the journey. Friends, family, your employer. We'll talk more about that later, I hope, but don't go it alone. Get started and start making those automatic contributions. I'm not sure if I said anything else, but the main gist was get started, don't go it alone, and automate, I think I said, if you can.
You are spot on. Great memory. That's exactly what you said. And I wanted to start here because that kind of lays, I agree with you 100% on that. And it lays the foundation for what we want to talk about next, which is one, I happen to think that naming a college savings program after a piece of the Internal Revenue Code is not a stroke of marketing brilliance. Do you agree with me on that?
I do agree with you. And with 2/3 of Americans still unable to identify these plans, I think we are both right.
Yes, it is really scary. But the second thing I think we absolutely will agree on that although 2/3 of Americans still don't know, the 1/3 that do know have probably chosen the best way to plan for college that's possible. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about some of the attributes. What makes 529 savings plans so special for those who want to save for their college or post-secondary education dream?
Sure. So, in my view, what makes 529 college savings plans so special are first and foremost the tax advantages. As these accounts grow in value, as your contributions grow in value, they're not being taxed along the way, unlike other types of accounts. Less tax can mean more money for college. What's also great is when you withdraw the money to use for a wide range, not just college, of higher education expenses, those earnings will never be taxed. I think that's terrific. And beyond this, 37 states, as of my last count, and the District of Columbia offer state tax incentives for individuals to save for college. So there's another wonderful component. I love that 529 accounts leave the control of the account in the account owner's hands. That's different than UGMA, UTMA, and other forms of trust accounts where it is the child or student who gets their hands on the money when they reach an age of majority, 18 or 21, depending on the state. I love the fact that the adult who opened the account decides whether and when and to what extent to withdraw the funds. That's different. I love the flexibility of these accounts. I hope we'll talk later about what they can be used for, but it's not just four-year college. It's 2-year, 4-year, trade and technical, even registered apprenticeships, graduate school, etc. And I also love the low initial minimum contributions that many states have, 25 or even less. Some states you can start with even $1, and the high maximum contributions. You need both. You need the low minimums to get people in, particularly those who are struggling a bit to save. You need the high maximums for any and all who can save more for college or trade school or technical school, because higher education tends to be expensive. So those are the things I love, and there are many more, but I would say those are the highlights in my mind, John.
Patricia, I think one of the issues that you raised here is it's so critical is that you want to try to save, but you also don't know what your child's going to do. So a lot of times parents who are, changing diapers and think, well, gee, it would be great if I could save, but I don't know what's going to happen here. Like, let's be realistic. Things change over the course of a child's life. But what you highlighted is really important. So tell us again that the parent gets to open the account and then they have control. So let's say that my daughter, turns out that she's a great kid, but college is not going to be for her. What options do I have then as a parent to preserve that? Am I going to lose that money?
No, you will not lose the money if the original beneficiary, your child in this example, doesn't have to be your child. It could be a niece or nephew, someone unrelated. But if that original beneficiary does not need the funds for college, or desire to go for some form of higher education, which I think is unlikely. I think most students will require or desire some form of higher education. The money is still yours. It is a myth that there will be money lost. It belongs to you as the account owner, and it's up to you what now to do. You can wait it out to see if that child changes their mind, they find themselves, they take a few gap years. There's no time limit on the account, so you can leave it in the account. You can change that initial beneficiary who's not pursuing higher education to someone else who will, provided they're a member of the family. And that is a very broad definition. It goes out to cousins, step siblings, aunt, uncles, even you. If you are related to that beneficiary, those funds can be used for your own higher education pursuit. So change it to somebody else. Save it for your child's children someday. Gee, if they don't want to pursue higher education, perhaps they'll form a family someday and can do that. You can also, as of 1/1/2024, depending on a variety of factors, including how long you've had the account open, you may roll up to $35,000 of that account balance to a Roth IRA
Yeah.
for the benefit of that original beneficiary, not for someone else, not for yourself, for that original beneficiary, subject to the Roth rules in terms of how much you can roll each year, 7,000, I think it is, and other conditions. But now you can do that, and you certainly can always, always, always take a non-qualified withdrawal, get your money back. You had not been paying tax on the earnings as they grew in value. Fair enough. Upon taking a non-qualified withdrawal, you're not using the funds for their intended purpose. You're going to owe tax on those earnings. And you will pay a 10% federal penalty on the earnings only. So you've contributed 10,000, it's worth 11. We're looking at that $1,000 in gain only, a 10% penalty on that, which would be $100. This is not a tremendous concern as far as I am thinking. I don't know how you feel about it, but many options if that child doesn't need or want the funds.
Don't tell my friends and your friends and our colleagues in the 529 world that I paid the penalty and I cashed out of one of those accounts. In fact, I told one of my friends this, and at New Year's dinner, he said, "Wait, you told me to keep it in there because I could save it. Well, what's this all about?" And I said to him, I actually regret that mistake. But at the time, we were doing something, and I thought, there's some money left in there. I don't know what's going to happen, so I actually went cashed out of that account. I regret it today because my daughter, who I thought would never return to college or to a grad school, actually is now enrolled in a grad MBA program, and she could have used that money. But again, it's your point is that, things change, people do things along the route, and you figure out what you want to do and take advantage of this program is really a big part of how families can construct what the answer is for them. And this is a clarification point for a lot of people. You mentioned the states, like a state program. And can you just talk a little bit about why there are so many 529 programs out there? It's like going to Baskin Robbins and having all these flavors, and I have to choose one. Why is that?
So pursuant to federal law, this Section 529 of the Internal Revenue Code, states actually can create and oversee and sponsor, so to speak, 529 college savings programs. And most want to do that to help their residents achieve some form of higher education. Every state in the United States, except for Wyoming, has at least one 529 college savings plan, and so does the District of Columbia. Why do I say more than one? Because some states have decided to have a plan that is offered direct to consumers. So via their website, you could go on, you could research New York's 529 plan, for instance, direct plan, and you could do it yourself. So for those individuals who are comfortable making choices about their own finances on their own, states offer a direct to consumer option. They also, in some cases, offer a plan that is sold through financial intermediaries, financial advisors, for instance. So for those families or those individuals who feel more comfortable making an investment with advice and guidance from a financial professional, there's an option for them too in many of the states. So couple of options in every state, and some states even have a couple of plans run by different investment firms as well. You wind up with a lot of choices. And that sometimes actually, John, confuses people. But again, you remember my advice from that lunch we had, just get started. You can invest in multiple plans, do something, do the best you can with the research. There's a ton of information online. Ask others who have done this. If you have a financial professional, you don't need to, you can ask them, but just do something, pick a plan. And if it's not to your liking in the long run, you can change to another plan, or you can have additional, they're not mutually exclusive. You could have an account in New York, but you've heard California's plan is quite good too. You can have an account there as well, saving even for the same beneficiary.
That's really a pretty spectacular opportunity for a lot of people. And we're not regulated. We don't give investment advice. I personally don't ever give anyone investment advice, but I do say this: if you're stuck, follow Patricia Roberts' advice and just get started, even if it means going to your state, finding the lowest fee plan possible. Start there. You don't have to put a ton of money in. You can put in $25 or maybe $1 if you're in one of those states. That it's very clearly outlined on the websites what it is. Just get started and then go back. One thing you didn't mention before, Patricia, and I don't know, it would have been on my list of the top 5, but every single saver in a 529 plan basically gets the benefit of the financial expertise of those firms that are sponsoring these plans, right? So what I love about it is you, as an unsophisticated investor, may not know anything about it. You can literally put the money in, set it and forget it, put it on they have these different kinds of, they call them glide path or age appropriate, but it steps down. So the closer you get to school, your child, the beneficiary gets to college, the less risky the portfolio becomes, the more certain it is. So there's a lot of investment advice built right into even the simplest, lowest cost plan. It's not as if you have to go in and choose all these options and have a big view of what's going to happen in the future. You can invest, set it, and forget it. I love that.
Yeah, that's a wonderful benefit for these plans, is that there is professional asset management or money managers, investment managers, as they're called, really developing these plans, deciding on the investment options with the states overseeing them carefully. That really does give, the average person access to some financial expertise. And there's a ton of information online about how have these portfolios, which are offered within the plans, how have they performed over the past 3, 5, 10 years, or over the life of the portfolio. While that's not necessarily indicative of how they'll perform in the future, there's plenty of information for you to look at. There's ratings of these plans as well, and certainly talk to others who have invested in them. And while you nor I know people's particular circumstances, we cannot give investment advice. We're not giving it. There is a lot of good educational information for you to look at and draw your own conclusions.
What is your number one myth that you think keeps parents from opening these accounts? They might have heard from friends or from others, and they say, you know what, that's enough to keep me away from this.
I think the number one myth, it's so hard to decide because there's so many that really concern me, but is that they're just for 4-year traditional college. And if your child doesn't go that route, can't be used at all. There couldn't be anything further from the truth. There are so many options for which these plans can be used. And that, I know they're called college savings plans. Oftentimes the states refer to them as that. College, really means something much broader, but most people think of it as that traditional, Ivy colored school with a 4-year degree, and they're not quite sure if this child, this infant, this adolescent even is going to pursue that path. So I would say the misunderstanding about the very broad use is something that I find really frustrating, and I'm out to bust that myth.
You're doing a great job, and that was actually second on my list as well, because I think this idea that there's not an opportunity, or you make an investment and then you don't have the opportunity to direct it or somehow lose it, becomes a pretty substantial piece of the puzzle for a lot of families. They just can't put their arms around that for very good reasons, obviously. Do you have another myth that you think is in the top 3? And then I'll tell you what I think my third one was.
There's one that's a little bit nuanced, but I think it's important to bust, which is that you have to be the parent of the account beneficiary in order to open the account. Not true. So many grandparents and aunts and uncles and godparents and even friends and neighbors sometimes want to get started saving for a child they love. I'd like to bust that myth. You do not have to be the parent in order to open the account.
That's great. The last, and you're right. When I went through and said, "Oh, I'm going to pick three," I was like, "Well, all you list 16, and you
Oh,
probably could go list 16 more when we really get into it." But I think it's worthwhile for everyone to go and read those 16 and talk about them with whomever it is that is giving them advice, or as you say, go and do some yourself. But here is the last one that I think when you finally get down to it. Parents think somehow that when they're going to pay the college bill, they're either going to save enough or they're going to have to borrow or they're going to hit the financial aid lottery or whatever it is. And then all of a sudden they say, oh, someone told me that if I save for college, I'm going to get less financial aid. I think it's in your book, you say the value of the 529 plan accounts will have a significant adverse impact on federal financial aid eligibility. Wrong. Talk to us about that.
that is a big misunderstanding that 529 accounts are going to have a significant adverse impact on federal financial aid eligibility. Not true. These accounts are counted very insignificantly. In fact, under the current formula, only 5.64% of the account value, if you even get to that point after you're looking at some other fundamental issues. But if the 529 is looked at, only up to 5.64% of the value will be considered in this federal financial aid formula. So if you've saved $10,000, we're looking at $564 of it. I think it is completely wrong to assume that saving is somehow not a good strategy. It is much better than holding out hope for financial aid, which largely often is student loans that need to be repaid. So I would say for federal financial aid purposes, set this worry aside. And I think with some of the FAFSA improvements, there might even be improved treatment for 529. That's a little bit nuanced, maybe for another conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just for those who are into the nuance, two things there. One is that the sibling accounts are no longer taken into account when for 529 assets. And the second, which is a huge deal, is that grandparent accounts are no longer a real deterrent. And so previously it was if I had a 529 for my granddaughter, if I gave the money, that became then income, and it was offset the financial aid award about 20 or so percent, which is a big deal rather than 5.64%. And now it's not counted at all. So, it's really just spectacular. And, we got onto this a little bit before, but those two issues that we just talked about around how the 529s are counted on the FAFSA form is important. But there have been significant other changes over the last 3 or 4 years. And I put up a piece on LinkedIn the other night said, this is the one bright spot in all of financial aid, and we need to start talking about this some more. But talk about some of the other changes that have come in the last several years. We've mentioned them piecemeal here, but maybe if you could go through them and really wrap a bow around it, it will help people understand that I believe that if the Congress has done one really good thing in the last 5 years, it's to help savers who want to save, not just for college, as you said, but for education and for other opportunities to get ahead. So can you just talk about that a little bit?
A few of the enhancements. One is something beyond higher education. 529 accounts can now be used for K to 12 tuition payments, tuition only, so not K to 12 broadly in terms of books and supplies and tutoring and so on, but K to 12 tuition. That is a development that I think is significant. You do want to check with your state 529 plan or whatever plan you're in to make sure they've conformed to the federal law change around that, because some states have not. But many people are happy to know that they can use the funds if they need to or want to for K to 12 tuition. Another update was that up to $10,000 from a 529 account could be used to repay student loan debt for the beneficiary on the 529 account. So if the child happened to borrow some student loans for whatever reason, your family strategy, you wanted them to have some skin in the game, so you had them take out some loans, the 529 account balance up to $10,000 could be contributed toward that beneficiary's student loan balance or the sibling of that beneficiary. Another development, the recent one that we just spoke of, which is remaining balances up to 35,000 can now, just as of the 1st of 2024, be rolled into a Roth IRA account for the benefit of the 529 beneficiary, subject to a variety of conditions. I just want to clarify that. But definitely check into that. If you've had an account open for more than 15 years, you're quite certain that there's not going to be some other need for those funds, you want to roll it into something else to help that very child that you care about so much, that's something to consider.
That's really great. And the one other that jumps to my mind is the accounts can now also be used for apprenticeship programs. So it's
Yes.
just not about going to college, but Congress has recognized that there's more than one way to be successful, and it's really great that they've allowed this. So what we've really said is that there's been an expansion of this program pretty significantly, and we're really hopeful. Those of us in the industry, like yourself and others, would really want to see people be good users of these programs and use them prudently. You can't really, though, talk about college savings without also talking about college debt. And we kind of started, you talked about that in the beginning a little bit. And I did want to jump into that for just a moment, because when families are figuring out how they want to pay that college bill when it finally comes, they have limited opportunities, really, right? They have their savings, they have scholarship opportunities potentially. They get financial aid, which comes from either the federal government or an institution in form of grants and scholarships. They have potentially work study that can come from the federal government. They might use payment plans to try to offset some of the student loans. But at the end of the day, and we say it all the time, is that we believe really strongly that student loans should really be the last resort, not the first option to pay for college. And too many times, the way the system is set up, families say, it doesn't matter what it costs because I'll just borrow. And then 15 years later in the New York Times, you're reading about how this poor borrower took out X dollars more than they could ever afford to repay. And how did this happen? But I wanted to ask you this. There's a spectrum of thought about this. One side of the spectrum is that student loans are evil and they shouldn't be here. And the other side of the spectrum says, well, student loans are really great. And like the Federal Plus program, which I happen to abhor, but it's as much as you want to, about anybody who can sign their name gets it. And that's the spectrum. What do you think student loans belong in that spectrum?
I think student loans should be avoided at all cost. I know that many cannot. I know I could not have done that as a student, but I think people need to think really long and hard before they take out student loans. Think of the child is 18 years old. Their brains are not even fully formed at this age. They have no income. They're not yet certain. Even if they think they're certain, they're possibly going to go on a different career track than they're even considering at that age. And for somebody so young to be signing up for an excessive amount of student loan debt, I think is really dangerous, quite frankly. I do think taking on student loan debt in a prudent way, having thought of all possibilities, was there a lesser price quality school that you could attend instead or attend for the first few years? Is there a way to get the cost down by maybe that second year serving as a resident advisor or finding some other way to make the net cost of the university more affordable? I think it's not a good idea to let a child, they're still children, make a decision to pursue a dream school that is absolutely unaffordable for your family and for that child, without really giving it a tremendous amount of thought. And I know there are calculators. John, your website has such great calculators for so many purposes. in order to figure out what you might be eligible for. I've seen calculators that can help you estimate what a career might pay, like so student loans over projected earnings. There used to be something called a slope calculator. But without taking a careful look at what those loan payments are going to feel like for 10, 15, 20 years or more down the line, either for the child or for the parent, I think is really, I want to say, almost negligible. I really don't think it's a great idea. And I repaid student loan debt for 20 years. I know what it feels like. I got it done. I would say my student loan payoff letter was something I wanted to frame. Almost, I couldn't afford to frame my undergraduate or my law degree, but I wanted to frame that pay down letter. That is how important that was to me. And that was such a relief when it was finally done. But can't say they're evil. I think they serve a purpose, but I think they should be avoided and really, really carefully thought through.
I agree with you on that. The other side of that coin, to play devil's advocate a little bit, because we fundamentally agree, excessive debt is not good for anybody. But I think what you said is right. A prudent or a reasonable amount, a thought out, planned amount is not necessarily difficult. And there are lots of indicators out there. One of those is if you borrow, total borrowing is less than what your first year earnings are, that's going to be a comfortable amount of debt for a student. So I'll say two things about that. Why and what the other side of the coin of why people should think about it. And again, an appropriate small amount of debt. One is that and I found this with both my daughters. I asked them both to take loans in their senior year, and I wanted them to understand what the consumer experience was to actually go through and take a loan and go through that whole process, because you're right. Now they're young adults and they're going to be consumers soon. So I thought there was some value in that. And the second, having some skin in the game. I know some of my friends had their kids take some of the loans during the course of the year just to keep them involved, right? And so there's that argument as well. And then third, which is not readily apparent, but is actually quite helpful, when the student gets out and they have a job and they have a reasonable amount of debt and they're making the payments, they build their credit score really quickly, right? And there's some value to that as well. So I think what you said, you and I agree, prudence is really the most important part of that equation. You can't borrow excessively, and if you don't have to borrow at all, that can be great too. But if there is a way to think about it for the future, for what you're trying to do with your children, there's no right answer. There's no silver bullet. But there are two sides to that coin for those who can manage that appropriately.
Absolutely. And I know we're going to talk about gift of college, but one of the things about taking out student loans, it is possible, again, you must be prudent in my view, is maybe you get an employer who's willing to help pay back some of that student loan debt for you. Something to consider. Now, that certainly is not guaranteed, but that's something that I happen to work, with my day job, on helping employers with this.
Well, you know what? Let's talk about your day job, because you're right. We're getting near the end of our time together, and I do want to talk a little bit about what Gift of College is doing. And Wayne Weber started that company just a little before, several years before we started Invite Education. We've always had a kinship of the struggles of trying to get a business off the ground. And what you all have done is really just absolutely fantastic and have been very innovative along the way and moving with the market. There were others who were working with Wayne at the time who tried to replicate what he was doing and didn't get there, because you've had your ear to the ground as a company and have really filled a need for people. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So at Gift of College, we bring awareness of 529 plans to the workplace and also awareness to ABLE plans, 529A ABLE plans, which maybe we'll talk about in another conversation, which really helps people save for disability related expenses. But with the amount of people unfamiliar with 529 plans and the number of people who are really used to in the workplace learning about investments from time to time, for retirement, for instance, Wayne Weber designed this platform whereby we're in the workplace, we're offering this valuable education. And beyond that, we offer a platform through which employees can take money directly from their paycheck and send it to any 529 college savings plan. Our design has been desirable for employers, particularly multi-state employers who have employees who live in different parts of the country or even just over state lines, right? It's Connecticut and New York or New Jersey and Pennsylvania. The employer doesn't want to pick just one 529 plan to offer to their employees. So we've got a platform that takes that stress off of the employer, lets the employee pick for themselves. They can connect any plan. Now, why is it valuable that there's a platform to send money directly from your paycheck? Well, research has shown, and it's actually Paul Curley's research from ISS, that individuals who save directly from their paycheck save 75% more. Makes sense, John. The money's not passing through your hands. It's going direct into the account. It really is advantageous. So our platform does the 529 college savings, the ABLE, and then also student loan repayment assistance. We have a lot of expertise around ways that employers can help on a tax-free basis to pay back employees' student loan debt. And our platform allows the employer to do that through it, and also to match contributions to college savings accounts. There are a growing number of employers in all industries, of all sizes across the United States, that are recognizing fully the amount of stress their employees are under with respect to higher education, either paying back the cost of it or saving for the cost of it, or both, as was the case in my life. I was doing both when my son was born. So employers are starting to help, and we're at the forefront of helping them to help employees. And I love this aspect of my job. It's exactly what I did for my son. Is I took money directly from my paycheck. It helped me at a time when I thought, how am I going to afford this? I just started a little at a time, and it really has turned out quite favorably for me. And I've heard this from other people. It just makes it easier. You're not thinking about it. You're not deciding, do I need that money for something else? Where else can I put those funds? Should I put it in the 529? No, it's going directly. So I'm real proud of our work in the workplace. That's one thing we do. We also have gift cards, John. You're familiar with our Gift of College gift cards. We now know that some employers are using these gift cards in the workplace. Instead of giving a silver spoon when a baby is born, or something, a baby Bjorn with the company's logo on it, they're starting to realize that giving a gift towards higher education is perhaps more meaningful. And some are even coupling that gift card with my book. So we're really happy about that. And those gift cards are available in retail stores like CVS, HEB in the South, Cumberland Farms, Save Mart. These can be purchased in retail as well, not in an employer context, but for friends and family. I give them for every baby shower I go to, every birthday party for a small child or older child. And they can be redeemed into any college savings account, ABLE account, or as a contribution towards student loan debt. So that's where we're at Gift of College. And one other innovation for parents who are about to send the kids off to college, we've come up with a convenient way to keep track of the money coming out of the 529 account and where it's being spent. We have a disbursement card that's a B2B product where we're talking to the different states about it. But we've got one state and others in line to help their investors take the money out of the 529 account and keep careful track of it. So you could send the kid off to college with a disbursement card with a certain amount on it, and you then know where's that money being spent should you ever get audited from a 529 perspective.
Yeah, that's where as a former CFO of a company, I immediately thought, oh, that's great for audit purposes, because if anyone ever
Yes.
comes back and knocks on the door and says, okay, how'd you really spend the money? There's the record. Well, thank you so much for joining us here in my College Corner. You've been a great friend, a great colleague, and obviously a passionate advocate of saving for families. So thank you so much.
My pleasure, John. Thank you again for having me.
You're welcome.